Mr. Roberts?
Present.
Ms. Pat?
Present.
Mr. Whalen?
Here.
Ms. Wyman?
Present. Okay, we're all, the clerk would note all present, and the Mayor Satterthwaite is also present. Are there any additions to the agenda? None, no additions to the agenda. Is there any staff report? There is not a staff report, or there? Oh, all right. We'll go on then to approval of the minutes of the previous meeting, November 22nd, 2004. Is there a motion? Is there there's a motion by Mr. Hayes, a second by Mr. Whalen. Are there any corrections? Ms. Pat?
Thank you. I have two corrections. The first is on page 3 in the list of people who were speaking in support of the resolution regarding public access. One name is included on that list that I recognize should not be there, and that's Harry Query at 2913 Rutherford. He was addressing the committee about the MTD resolution. So if we could remove his name from that list and put his name on the list of people, or indicate that a new sentence that he addressed the committee regarding the MTD resolution.
Are there any other? Oh, Ms. Pat, sorry.
Just to make sure if the clerk, did you see it? Okay, thank you. And the other is on page 4, just for clarity. The last paragraph under item 2, UPTV membership, is that paragraph is written in the first person. It was something that the mayor said. So if we could just insert the words Mayor Satterthwaite said prior to the words at this point we are not recommending, that would make it read more clearly.
Thank you. Are there any other suggestions? It's page 4, last paragraph under number 2.
Okay.
Are there any other suggested changes? All in favor of passing the minutes of the November 22 Committee of the Whole as amended on the floor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Those pass. Next, we've got public input. I've got 3 cards up here. If there's anyone else, please fill out a card and just bring it up to the clerk. We have 2 people who, let's see, sorry. First is Jane Moraz, representing herself, of 206 West Pennsylvania, on the topic of Democracy Now! She does not choose to address the committee, but asks that her position be entered into the record in support of Democracy Now! Jack Newsom, representing himself and his wife of 302 North Behringer Circle, also on the topic of,
These are
from these, sorry, these are from a different meeting. I'm not sure, Mayor Satterthwaite just gave those to me, but I guess they were left over. I apologize. There's only one sheet, and as I understand, Mr. Burrell would like to wait until the agenda item to address it.
Good night.
On the tax levy, okay. Would you like to speak now then? And he's speaking in opposition.
Yeah. Let me just start. So, hello, my name is John Burrell, and I would like to talk to council tonight about taxes. I know the item is not actually on the agenda, so I'll try to be brief. But I also know that I won't be here for the public comment meeting that's scheduled for December 27th, as I think some of the council members have indicated. The first thing I'd like to say is I'm against the proposed new tax levy. First, I would just argue the exact same arguments that Mr. Quake proposed at the public hearing last week, that the economic growth of this community is not determined by the city, it's determined by the tax resident, by the taxpayers, and that increasing the resources of taxpayers increases the possibility of economic growth. It doesn't always happen, but if it's not in taxpayer hands, it certainly cannot happen. In addition, there's some special needs, especially about property taxes, that need to be taken into account, particularly for retired individuals. Retired individuals living on fixed incomes do not gain a cost of assessed value increase in their pension plans, but instead have to use their limited resources to try to pay off an investment they thought they'd already paid off, one of the primary investments they often make, their houses. In addition to these arguments, there's just a simple common sense argument that I don't think has been made. What's changed in the budget in the last 7 days that we need this additional money? If the budget might have been tight a week ago, but manageable, why do we need this extra additional money coming in from the increased assessments? In addition, because the current tax levy estimate is estimated to actually decrease our tax rate, the city will have some additional cushion because our bill to Urbana tax rebates will be smaller than we anticipated. This provides some of the cushion that we may need. And finally, I think the Build Urbana program itself gives a perfect indication of why the new tax levy should not be pursued. What a better way to demonstrate that Urbana is trying to develop a dynamic business community, as Mr. Hill said in the last meeting, than to have a smaller tax rate than the city of Champaign. If anybody has questions, I'm open to questions. But
Thank you.
thank you very much.
If there's no one else who'd like to speak in public input, we'll move on to item number 5, which is ordinance number 2004-12-153, and ordinance amending Schedule H of Section 23-93 of the Urbana Traffic Code requiring stop signs at a certain intersection, McCullough Street at Griggs Street, Locust Street at Central Avenue. Mr. Gray?
Thank you. At the most recent Traffic Commission meeting, these items did come up on the agenda and recently brought to our attention. And basically, there were a couple. One street is a T intersection. We included a map, more or less showing the geographic location of where these locations are and the street configurations. So Locust Street would be westbound Locust Street stopping at Central Avenue, which is a T intersection. There is a school at this intersection along with a church in this area. The second location is a McCullough and Griggs, where McCullough would be stopping for the through street at Griggs Street. More or less, this is a T intersection situation too. So those are the recommendations for the Traffic Commission to require stop signs.
Are there any questions on this first ordinance? All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
Is there a motion? We didn't have a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there
Second.
motion by Hayes, second by Pat?
Is that omnibus or is it?
No, that's just this one.
This one, okay.
With no further discussion on item 6A, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Mr. Gray, item 6B, ordinance number 2004-12-154, an ordinance amending Schedule L of Section 23-187 of the Urbana Local Traffic Code prohibiting parking in specified places, Harding Drive.
This came to our attention, and it had to do more with a visibility related concern, and that is for southbound vehicles on Anderson and westbound vehicles on Harding Drive. And the recommendation was to extend the no parking zone a little further than where it currently is, to provide that safe distance for maneuvering and operating one's vehicle there. So there is a certain length of distance where there's no parking on Harding, and this would be extending that distance a few more feet, 45 to be exact. So again, this was considered by the Commission. It was brought to our attention by residents in the area.
Thank you. Are there questions for staff? If there aren't any questions, the motion?
Second.
Motion by Hayes, second by Chenoweth. Are there any comments? With no comments, all in favor of sending this to council with a recommendation for approval, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That passes. Are we ready for presentation?
Yeah.
Wonderful. We'll move back to item number 5, the county visiting. Mr. DeNovo?
Now let's try this again. I apologize for that glitch, but I think we're in good shape here. As you know, this is about Champaign County, and I did want to point out that the image on the left there actually is the Urbana Farmers Market. The city is represented on the title slide, although I did get that off a Turkish website of a graduate of an engineer who did his graduate work at the university. I don't really need to belabor this point very much for a community that's in the final phases of updating its comprehensive plan. You're well aware of the importance of looking forward in order to be in control of the future rather than to be a passive recipient of what the future might bring you. But as we look at the entire county as a community, there is another question, the same question, at that larger scale that we need to address. And I think to really, grab hold of that future at any significant scale, you're looking at three principal concerns. A clarity of vision. You really need to know where you're going. You need to have unity of purpose to move the community in the same direction. And you need to have a real commitment to action to bring it about. And those three things don't, in any significant sized group, will not arise spontaneously. They have to be actively cultivated. And we propose a community visioning project as a means, an effective means of cultivating that unity, clarity, and commitment at the scale of the entire county. What the community visioning project is essentially is a process that allows you, helps the community to understand the issues and forces that are affecting it and will affect it in the future. That allows the people to come together to describe what their preferred future is, to create then a plan of action to bring that preferred future into being, and to inspire the community to pursue that plan of action actively and effectively. What I like to think of it as the county visioning project is a county-wide conversation, a conversation specifically about the future. And I have, this is somewhat ambitious, but I don't think it impossible to achieve, to expect to bring 30,000 people into that conversation in Champaign County in some way. Have them touch the process and have their views reflected to some degree in some manner. Now, importantly, this is not just about public meetings that we're all familiar with or workshops, but it's about conversations that happen on street corners and in classrooms and wherever people spend some time to stop and talk. It's really a matter of taking a moment to stop and reflect and think about the future collectively. One of the things that you're going to address are a variety of strategic issues. These are put up here only for example. The actual strategic issues that emerge or will be addressed in the process are the ones that the process identifies. But we can guess what some of these primary themes and certain issues might be, as illustrated here. I think it's also importantly about clarifying community values. That's one of the core purposes of this, is to look at the community, look at these forces, and understand exactly where the points of agreement are, where the broad agreement on shared concerns really is. To some degree, this is about, at a community scale, overcoming ambivalence. And I was questioned about what that ambivalence means, and what it really is about is those points where there is almost equal division or uncertainty about how to move forward. And there are some areas, I think, where there is real ambivalence and real lack of clarity about what people think. I was approached by a citizen of Urbana in a local restaurant a few years ago who came up to me and said rather plaintively, "Do we have to be a city?" And I thought, this is 36,000 people here. That question has really already been decided, but it illustrates the fact that some people would rather be the world's largest small town, other people would rather be a more cosmopolitan and more active and exciting city. And where you actually come down along those lines is a question to be resolved. In this process, you're always going to be identifying potentially conflicting values that you want to achieve, and you need to come to a better understanding of what the trade-offs are between high levels of amenity and tax rates, between environmental protection and housing costs, and so on and so on. And in confronting those trade-offs, identifying what your priorities are. Just to give one illustration of what this might mean. I like this project quite a bit, and this happens to be on from Washington State. Bainbridge Island. Thank you, John. These are small houses, about 1,200 square feet. That makes it about the size of the house I grew up in, but much smaller than the average new house that's being constructed in Champaign-Urbana today. And it's built at a density of about 10 units per acre. Now, we all might sit here and agree that this looks like a nice project. But if you were to propose to put a development at 10 units to the acre of houses of only 1,200 square feet in many residential neighborhoods in this community, you would receive a lot of opposition. You know, what looks good to some people is going to look quite different from another perspective. And so working through where we really stand on questions like this is going to be really important. Because clearly, if we want to preserve prime farmland, we would much rather develop at 10 units per acre than at just 2 or 3. Another important aspect of the visioning process is that it is action-oriented. The purpose really is to develop a shared community agenda that is built on broad shared understanding and has broad support in the community. Now, this means that you can't pursue every value that every interest group has, but you can pursue those things on which there is this broad agreement. This also allows constituencies to develop around each of the elements of the agenda that you identify, so that you energize your community to actually pursue that agenda and see to it that it comes into being. We've actually gone through a process similar to this back 28 years ago now, in 1976, the town meeting for tomorrow. And this is a very similar sort of process, although different in some important respects. But it was, again, a long discussion that occurred over a long series of meetings, about a year, and was oriented around a variety of issues, mostly related to growth. Some interesting things can be said about the recommendations that came from the town meeting. There were a number that were developed. One was to set a target population for the county in 2000 of 180,000. The actual population was 179,699. They also called for an improvement to the airport terminal, and we built a new one in 1989. They called for development of an intermodal transit facility, and we built the Illinois terminal in 99. Called for a countywide public health agency, which came to existence in 98, and a countywide economic development entity, which came into existence in 2001. Now, I don't by any means claim that the town meeting in 1976 directly resulted in those things happening. A lot of those ideas were current in the community when the discussion started. It obviously took a long time for them to be realized, but I do think that it helped build constituencies behind these ideas. It introduced them to a wider audience. It allowed that large audience of community leaders to discuss the merits of these ideas and have some sense of their importance. And I think that by itself, even without developing a clear-cut agenda, that helped bring these things into being. Now, a good visioning process will have certain characteristics. It will be strategic. It's going to take a big picture view, and it is going to make connections between things that might not necessarily seem connected. It is going to be participatory. Everybody has to be at the table, including and especially those groups that aren't normally at the table. I think for particularly some groups that I can think of that would be low-income working families. And another is people under 30. As I go to meetings and talk about varieties of issues, I just look around and see an awful lot of gray hair. And we really need to get younger people more involved in these processes. It needs to be creative. It needs to be open-minded. It needs to accentuate the positive, and you need to look at finding the synergies, that the way pursuing one objective can support pursuing other objectives. And lastly, it needs to be action-oriented and identify specific actions, the progress of which can be made measurable in some manner. Now, we think this needs to be done at a county-wide scale for it to be really effective for a variety of reasons. The county comes closer to matching the actual housing, labor, media, and other markets that define the local economy. And of course, there are a lot of issues that cross jurisdictional boundary lines. If we're concerned about the condition of the Salt Fork River, we have to talk not just to the county, but to the village of Rantoul and the city of Champaign, Urbana, St. Joe, all have impacts on the river. Also, the county corresponds to a lot of key jurisdictions. There's the county government itself, of course, but there's also the Forest Preserve District, Board of Health, Soil and Water Conservation District, and so on, the Regional Planning Commission, for that matter. And lastly, the county and municipalities in Illinois have jurisdictions that are intertwined in overlap in complicated ways, and then you need to look at a larger scale, I think, in order to understand exactly how all of the government jurisdictions will operate. Functionally, the region really is one from an economic perspective, and in terms of whether we are going to prosper or not, we have to look at it as a single entity, which means we have to come to some broad agreement as a community at that scale. Now, we've been tasked to put this together as a public-private collaboration. One of the things what that really means is this is not going to be a government project per se. It's not going to be done within a framework of any one government's statutory powers or jurisdiction. It's going to be done as a community project that isn't tied to any specific unit of government. This is partly to make it as broad-based and participatory as we can, to make it credible to everyone. There are people, as you might guess, in Champaign County that have a bit of a chip on their shoulder about this or that government jurisdiction and feel uncomfortable working with them. We don't want this to be tied to any specific jurisdiction or authority. We have home rule units in the county. We have lots of non-home rule units in the county. We have lots of special purpose units in the county, and they all have to be considered as we look at ways of achieving our purposes. We don't want this project to have to compete with the limited time that folks in your position have to deal with issues. You've got plenty on your plate, and setting this up as an independent process means that we have to deal with it on a day-in and day-out basis. But also we can insulate it from partisan politics, and it can be done in a way that it's not burdened with any baggage from any past conflicts that we might have encountered. Most importantly, what really will make this work is this is not going to succeed because it can go forward by the force of law. This is going to succeed because there is a shared commitment to making it succeed in the community. And that's what's really important. It is not something that can simply be tasked to this or that unit of government and to this or that set of bureaucrats to achieve. This has to be a do-it-yourself project by the entire community if it's going to really be meaningful. Now, this is a little diagram to just summarize very sketchily how this might work. And in part, I have avoided developing this in any greater detail because it's really, as I say, it needs to be a do-it-yourself project. And as we go forward with this, the larger community needs to shape this in the detail. But basically what you're looking at is a steering committee. We imagine 12 to 15 people that will get the ball rolling, identify the financial support, line up volunteers, identify people that might be participating in this project, make some design decisions about it, identify where the technical support will come from, and so on. And we're in the process right now of assembling that body to go forward. And it might, as the arrow on the right suggests, it might actually have some ongoing existence in some form as a way of monitoring the progress of all of this. In the middle there, you'll see the community assembly. That's where the work really gets done. That's a larger group that we imagine will be 40 to 90 people. In some places, they've been even larger. It needs to be as large as it has to be, but not larger than is required to be fully representative of all of the interests in the community. You want everybody there at the table. I mean, I can imagine that we should have high school students participating in this process, for example, and people who don't speak English, and all kinds of people that should be involved in the community assembly. And that's the body that is actually going to do the work, that is going to work through the discussions, develop the strategic assessments, construct a vision statement, construct a description of this preferred future, and actually develop the action plan. You'll see at various points we'll have town meetings where there'll be sort of open-ended opportunities for for feedback to the proposals that the Community Assembly develops. And importantly, there will be an outreach program, and I want to talk about that in some more detail. That is really a key to the effectiveness of this whole thing. And we are going to want to wrap this up with a celebration, and then, of course, the key thing, the green go for it thing down there is the ongoing implementation, which is at the end of the day, is what we're really after, is to find that agenda that we can all agree on so that we can move forward with it. Now, I mentioned the outreach program. We need to do, I think, an active sort of an outreach program beyond what we would normally do in any other planning context, particularly because we're doing this on a county-wide basis. We foresee this consisting of a number of things. Community surveys conducted in a variety of ways. Telephone surveys. We're very interested in the possibility of doing workplace interviews as a way of reaching low-wage workers that might not otherwise participate even in a telephone survey. We want to make maximum effective use of electronic media. There are a variety of interactive technologies that we can make use of. There's the NIPSI has this Paint the Town technology that they've used. There are, of course, web-based things that we can use. We want to work directly with specific interest groups, help particular identified interest groups define their own visions so that they can come together in the larger body and describe them more effectively, and everyone can understand one another better. There are town meetings, as I've mentioned, and in a very extensive promotion program. We really want to be out there at every large gathering, at the farmers market, at the fair, at the Taste of Champagne, every place that there is that we can. We really want to work hard, very hard, at getting people excited and interested in this. Now, as you well know, there's been a lot of planning done recently in the community, and there's planning ongoing. This is just a partial list of what's going on. There are a lot of comprehensive plans. The tan areas on that map represent the areas that are included in various municipal comprehensive plans. We've got the Route 150 corridor plan there in blue, the ongoing Route 130 corridor plan in orange, and the ongoing 5 corridor plan in green. You can't quite see it, but there's a red line on there that stands for the boundaries of the long-range transportation plan, for example. So there's a wide variety of planning efforts. And the questions come up, how does visioning relate to planning? And this here is the slide that I've included for the mayor. I had taken it out, but the metaphor I came up with is a rainbow. A bit hackneyed, I admit, but I think it's apt. And the visioning project is like a rainbow in a variety of ways. First, it's something that is intended to be visible to the entire community, something that all of us are involved in and can appreciate. It arches over the existing plans, and it is not intended to disturb them in any way. This is not something that supplants any existing planning efforts. It might identify a need to go back and adjust plans or update plans or make new plans that don't exist, but it's not intended to disturb anything that is already in place. It contains a full spectrum of interests of the community, and most importantly, it doesn't touch the ground. Unlike comprehensive planning, the visioning process does not have to get down into the nitty-gritty decisions of we're going to designate this land use up to this point and this land use beyond it. We're going to draw the line here. We're going to specify this. And all of the difficult, specific, place-based compromises that are necessary when you get into real concrete planning. It has some particular outcomes. It's going to produce a vision document that contains this broad agreement and this image of the future of the community expressed in compelling ways, and hopefully with some really hot graphics. It's going to contain the action plan, this community agenda that can provide this platform from which we can take a variety of initiatives. And as I mentioned, it produces an energized community, constituencies that will follow through on the action plan. Well, we think that this will take a number of, buy-in is critical, of course, particularly from community leaders, both in government and business. and in the nonprofit sector for that matter. Take about 12 months to complete from the time that we get it off the ground. Probably $230,000 to $290,000 is our current estimate of the cost, which includes both cash and in-kind contributions. And it's going to require some technical support. Putting together this active outreach program or organizing all the meetings and everything is going to be a considerable amount of work. Now, we think we can make this doable financially by spreading it over a couple of fiscal years, soliciting many smaller contributions from public, nonprofit, and private sector actors. Most of the groups that we've spoke to so far have been very positive, and we've gotten significant expressions of support that right now total more than half of that amount that we indicated. So we think it's really doable to put these contributions together from multiple sources. Now, in doing that, and I may just be making a virtue of necessity here, but I really do think it is valuable that we're going to many different groups, many different entities, and asking for many smaller contributions. Because the more buy-in in the most concrete possible way that we can have to this, actual investment in it, the more commitment we have, and I think the stronger the process will be. And of course, we're very interested in making use of in-kind contributions and volunteers for the same reason. The more participation we have in this, the more investment in it, the stronger it'll be. Now, there's some real challenges to getting this done. In the first place, Champaign County really only exists in some ways as abstract lines of latitude and longitude. There's no sort of Champaign County identity. People don't think of themselves as Champaign Countyans. They tend to have more localized identities. And so to try to get everybody to think in terms of Champaign County will be a challenge. There's this whole bowling alone phenomena, this sort of general level of diminished civic participation that affects the entire community and the greater demands that are placed on everyone's time these days. And then coming out of this recent election campaign, I think you can see where there is a loss of conviviality. It gets harder for people to come and work together in a positive context. There are more ways, more fissures of conflict. And so we have to work hard to come together in a friendly, open, constructive way. And we have a heterogeneous population, which makes it a little bit harder for people to come to that common ground of agreement. We have some tremendous assets, though, as we go forward with this. We've got a lot of knowledge and expertise, and by that I do not just mean the University of Illinois. Everybody thinks, oh, we've got this huge reservoir at the university, but we also have a lot of talented people outside of the university. We've got a lot of interesting businesses. The Chicago Tribune just had a business feature on the business of Rantoul that does the museum exhibitions, for example, things that there's some remarkable people in this community outside of the university. We have and can take advantage of all of these current planning efforts. We've developed a lot of information, identified a lot of issues. There's a real foundation to go forward with all of the existing planning efforts. And we've got a lot of experience in working together and intergovernmentally in a lot of contexts. We know how to do that. And right now there's a lot of interest across the board in this community in planning issues, more so than I've seen in the 20 years that I've been here. So right now we're in the process of what we call building the boat so that we can set off on this voyage. We're putting the steering together. We've had a meeting week before last of I called it a brainstorming meeting of about 20 people that was really constructive, and we're going to have another one early in January to keep this moving forward. Of those 20 people, probably have got half a dozen that are reasonably well committed to serving on the steering committee. We're pursuing financial support, although we have not yet asked anybody for firm commitments. We have been asking people for expressions of support and an indication of what we might be able to expect. And we think we can look forward to potentially kicking this off in March, which would be optimal, I think, for purposes of spreading it out of those fiscal years. So to modify a quote from the National Civic League, if we stop for a minute and we can imagine what Champaign County could be, that is really what we're talking about. And if you were to ask me, do we have to do this, I would have to honestly say, no, we do not have to do this. But if we want to be able to look our grandchildren in the eye and say we did everything that we could to make Champaign County the best possible place for them that it could be, I think something along these lines really is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, with no questions, appreciate you all coming and sharing this vision with us, and I suppose we'll look forward to periodic updates.
And a formal request for funding at some point.
I knew that was coming too. Thank you.
Ms. Wyman, I do have a question. What's the timeline in terms of, I know that you've done the kickoff already, or you had an initial meeting and I received information about that, but in terms of constituting a steering committee, and how would we, I have an email list that I send to all my constituents, and I would love to give them the opportunity of knowing more about this and potentially participating. So is there some way I could get some kind of summary, digital summary of it that I could send on to them?
Yes, I can email that. I just identified today that I have been reluctant to go too far, because I really want the steering committee, when it coalesces, to grab hold of this and move forward with it. And I don't want people to get the idea that somehow this is something that the RPC is putting together that the community is going to buy off the shelf. But I think we probably will need to be assembling a website, a page on the RPC website where people can come in and access this kind of material. In the near term, I can email you something. I'm sure I can get your email
I'll just give it
off
to
the
you.
city website or somewhere. But in the longer term, we'll try to get that website up as quickly as we can.
Thank you. Now we'll move on to